In this 11th edition of our journey through the book of Ruth, we're going to be looking at chapter 4, verse 1 to 16. And in this section, we're going to see the plan coming together. We're going to see things materializing. We're going to see something of a climax, really, to this amazing story that we've been journeying through so far. We're going to see Boaz responding to his promise that he made, and God really working through him and in this situation in a wonderful way. So let's read this section together. We're reading from verse 1, chapter 4, through to verse 16, almost to the end of the chapter. Boaz went to the gate of the town and sat down there. Soon the family redeemer Boaz had spoken about came by. Boaz said, "Come over here and sit down." So he went over and sat down. Then Boaz took 10 men from the town's elders and said, "Sit here." And they sat down. He said to the Redeemer, "Naomi, who has returned from the territory of Moab, is selling the portion of the field that belongs to our brother Elimelech. I thought I should inform you. Buy it back in the presence of those seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you want to redeem it, do it. But if you do not want to redeem it, tell me so that I will know, because there isn't anyone other than you to redeem it, and I am next after you. I want to redeem it," he answered. Then Boaz said, "On the day you buy the field from Naomi, you will acquire Ruth, the Moabitess, the wife of the deceased man, to perpetuate the man's name on his property." The Redeemer replied, "Can't redeem it myself, or I will ruin my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption, because I can't redeem it." At an earlier period in Israel, a man removed his sandal and gave it to another party in order to make any matter legally binding concerning the right of redemption or the exchange of property. This was the method of legally binding a transaction in Israel. So the Redeemer removed his sandal and said to Boaz, "Buy back the property yourself." Boaz said to the elders and all the people, "You are witnesses today that I am buying from Naomi everything that belonged to Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth, the Moabitess, Mahlon's widow, as my wife to perpetuate the deceased man's name on his property so that his name will not disappear among his relatives or from the gates of his hometown. You are witnesses today." All the people who were at the city gate, including the elders, said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is entering your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built the house of Israel. May you be powerful in Ephrathah, and may your name be known in Bethlehem. May your house become like the house of Perez, the son Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring the Lord will give you by this young woman." Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. He slept with her, and the Lord granted conception to her, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord who has not left you without a family redeemer today. May his name become well known in Israel. He will he will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. Indeed, your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons has given birth to him." Naomi took the child, placed him on her lap, and became his nanny. And this is really such a wonderful climactic moment to this amazing story. We've seen the story really starting off with sadness and sorrow, disappointment, despair, even death. And we saw Naomi coming back to Bethlehem and saying, "Don't call me Naomi, but call me Mara, because I'm full of bitterness. I've gone away full and I've come back empty." And we see Ruth traveling with her and coming back with her and entering the field of Boaz and meeting him. And we see this section really focusing in on Boaz executing the plan that he promised after Ruth approached him in the night. And we really see in this passage something of Boaz's wisdom and integrity, his integrity to follow through on his word, and his integrity not just to jump ahead and bypass the customary laws and procedures, but his integrity to do the right thing the right way. Remember, Boaz really is a man of integrity. We see his integrity uh, among his servants. Remember in chapter 2, when he greeted his servants, he said, "The Lord be with you," in chapter 2, verse 4. And they responded, "The Lord bless you." And we see here a man whose faith is not just a surface level faith, but one whose faith has been integrated in every part of his life. We see even in the way he interacts with his employees, we see something of integrity to his faith. If you want to know about a businessman's faith, you can go and speak to his employees and find out uh, if his faith is true. So he was a man of integrity among his servants, but he was a man of integrity in how he dealt with Ruth. He dealt with her with care and compassion. He dealt with her not just to get what he can, but to give and to bless and to protect and to provide for. And we see even as Ruth visited him in the night and came there to the threshing floor, and no doubt this man who was attracted, who had noticed her in the beginning among the various women in the field, he noticed her and who had this growing affection for her that he had made clear through his discreet but clear signs of his affection and intentions towards her. And then at night, as she was dressed in her best and had put perfume on and approached him in the night on the threshing floor, he didn't give in to whatever temptations might have stirred within him in that moment, but he protected her integrity even in that moment and showed himself as a man of integrity. But we also just see wisdom and how he carefully and thoughtfully approaches the situation. He doesn't just charge in, but he thought it through and he carefully and thoughtfully approached this other family redeemer. So remember that the Redeemer was this custom in Israel that the Lord had initiated to provide for and to care for widows, but also um, to protect a family line. Remember Elimelech and both his sons had died, and his name would cease to exist if a close relative hadn't stepped in and taken the role of marrying the widow um and marrying her the with the intention to have children with her and to have a son that could carry on the name and carry on the ownership of this land. Remember when the Lord gave Israel the promised land, land was a very precious and important thing, and land was distributed by tribes and by clans, by families. And so this land was very precious and very important. And the Lord intended that the land be kept within these families. And so uh, this practice, this pattern was put in place to have a family redeemer. But when Ruth met Boaz, there was this providential meeting of Boaz, who was a close relative of theirs. But there was someone even closer that Boaz speaks of. He says, "Yes, I am a family redeemer." In chapter 3, as Ruth approaches him, but he says, "But there is someone who's actually closer than me, who, in a real sense, has the rights to marry you before me." And and so Boaz approaches this man. He waits at the city gates and and sees this man approaching and calls him aside and invites him to buy back the portion of land belonging to Elimelech and to his sons. And And so this man really had a responsibility to buy back this land. And so he says, yes, I will redeem it. I will buy this land. I will pay for it and have this land. Um, but then he changes his mind. He said, I will redeem it. And then he goes on a few verses later to say, I can't redeem it, or I will ruin my own inheritance, take my right of redemption because I can't redeem it, he says to Boaz. And you might think, what happened? Why did he say this? And he said it in response to Boaz saying, when you buy back this field, you will acquire Ruth as well, the Moabitess, the wife of the deceased man, to perpetuate the man's name on his property. And so you may say, well, why did he stand back? Why did he step back in this moment? And I think there's three potential reasons. One, the most generous towards this man would be that perhaps he was already married, and to take a second wife would have been a challenge and a burden, and would have was not actually God's initial plan. He may have already been married, and so said, "No, I can't actually take on this property." Then uh, it could also be perhaps that as he realized that he would have to take Ruth as a wife and to work then to perpetuate the man's name on his property, um, he suddenly might have realized this is actually there's a great cost to this, because when the son that he potentially would have born to Ruth would have come of age, he would have handed that land over to the son. And so, he would have had a short experience of the benefits of this land, and he might have thought to himself, "Well, this is going to cost me. I'm going to have to care now for additional people, both Naomi and Ruth, and then the children that I will bear to her, and then this land is going to be handed off to her son when he comes of age." And so he might have suddenly started feeling the cost and pulled back. But there is also a third potential answer, and that was that he would have potentially lost his standing amongst the people, or have thought he might have lost standing amongst the people, marrying a Moabite woman, and possibly a barren woman. Remember that Ruth was married to Mahlon at least for 10 years, and there was no such thing as birth control then. They they would have begun the journey of having children right away, and but she had no children, and so perhaps she it's likely that she was barren, that she was not able to have children, and so this man may have felt the cost in that respect of saying, well, I don't want to commit myself to this woman who's not going to be able to give me children, and and who is a Moabitess, who's from the land of Moab, who's not a native of this land, and so the cost was weighing up, and he opted not to proceed to redeem this land. And I just think what a contrast that is from our Redeemer, our Redeemer Jesus Christ, who was willing and pleased to pay the full price, to pay the absolute price, even to redeem us. That he is not intimidated by our past, whatever our past, wherever we came from, whatever we've done. He is willing to pay the price, and so we see this redeemer stepping back, and our what first seemed like a snag in the story, this man saying, yes, I want to redeem it, and Boaz, and like this wedge coming between Boaz and Ruth. We see that the tables are turned, and Boaz is able to buy back the land and marry Ruth. And And what a beautiful story this is then of Ruth and Boaz coming together in marriage, this wonderful blessing that is pronounced by the people and the elders, and and they became husband and wife, and we see that they then consummated the marriage, and and the Lord, it says, granted her conception, and she gave birth to a son. And what an amazing gift this is. You see, the prayer of fruitfulness by the elders and the people was granted this blessing. They pronounced uh, on Boaz. Ruth, the Lord worked a miracle in her, and she did. The Lord opened her womb really, and she was able, as it says, granted by the Lord to conceive and to give birth to a son. And I think we just see so clearly what a blessing children are in this passage. In our modern day and age, children are sometimes seen as a burden, as a hindrance, as sometimes simply a duty. We see people wanting to have less and less children, sometimes not even to have children today. And I don't think that's God's heart. God's heart is to say, actually, this is a blessing, this is a gift. And really, I think in this statement, the Lord granted conception to her. We must recognize that each child is a gift from God. There's actually many stories in the Bible where women could not have children, and the Lord worked a miracle, directly intervened to give them ability to have children. We see this with Sarah. Remember, in her old age, she gave birth to a son Isaac, and then Isaac and Rebecca. Rebecca couldn't have children, and then God opened her womb, and she was able to have children. And then Rachel even couldn't have children, and God heard her prayer and her cries, and she was able to give birth to a child. And then Hannah, remember, Hannah couldn't have children, and Eli saw her praying in the temple and thought she was drunk, but she said no, she was praying, and he blessed her, and God opened her womb, and she gave birth to Samuel. Remember in the New Testaments, that mighty man of God, John the Baptist, was born to Elizabeth in her old age, and who was beyond childbearing age, but God made a way. And of course, you remember our Lord Himself was miraculously conceived, and a virgin birth, um, to Mary, and we just see surely that this child born to Ruth is going to be someone quite special. It's going to be someone quite significant, because each of these children that were born to these women were absolutely significant in God's purposes and plans. And I think we also see in this incredible miracle worked in Ruth's womb that God loves to bring life where there is barrenness. And I think that's something of Ruth's story. There was barrenness, brokenness. She was born into the wrong people, far from God, and married. Um, and her husband died, and she couldn't have children, but God brought her back, and God bound her with Boaz, and God um, gave her a child. And I don't know whatever situation you might face and might be in, and it might really feel like barrenness, but we must look to the story and look to the God of the story and recognize that He is one who works miracles even in times of barrenness. So this really is a beautiful and wonderful climax to the story. And in our next episode, we will just have a bit of an overview and look at the final passage of our journey through the book of Ruth.